So week 16 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I have as the top 12 ranked this week. The first one, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Buccaneers here, I know it hasn't been that great of a season on the defensive side of the ball or special teams, but this week here they got a very good matchup with the Carolina Panthers that give up the third most fantasy points to defenses on the season. And the last 2-3 months here, besides the first couple weeks of the season, this Panther offense, it's just been a mess in general here. They're not moving the ball, turning the ball over a lot. In my opinion, Cam Newton, he looks washed up and like a quarterback that's just going out there and he don't really have a plan and he don't even know what he's doing. So right here, Tampa Bay's banged up on the offensive side of things. But defensively, they've got a few guys back over the last few weeks here. And I think Cam Newton, if he's going to start in this one, or if Sam Darnold or P.J. Walker, whoever it is, one of those quarterbacks, they're good for a few turnovers in this ball game. And I could see Tampa Bay winning a lot in this one because of their defense, making plays, getting sacks. And I think they find the end zone one way or the other on a fumble recovery or a pick six or something. And especially after last week losing to the New Orleans Saints, they bounce back big this week and they have a huge game. The second defense, the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs here, they've been playing great football now, is Kansas City, after winning the last 7 games in a row here. And the defense, for the most part, has been the main factor why they're winning. The offense has struggled for the most part of the season. Besides the last 2 games here, the offense has kicked it into gear. But the last few games here for Kansas City, Week 13 versus Denver, 9 points allowed, a sack, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown. Week 14 versus the Vegas Raiders, 9 points allowed in that ball game, 4 sacks and 4 fumble recoveries and a return touchdown. And then week 15 at the Chargers wasn't a great performance, 28 points allowed and on a fumble recovery. But right here, week 16 versus Pittsburgh, that gives up the 18th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. This Steeler offense, they got a lot of good weapons, they got a lot of good names, but this season it's just not clicking. And I think it starts with the offensive line isn't that great. And Ben Roethlisberger, his best years are behind him, where I think this probably should be it for Big Ben, and he should retire. Because for the Steelers, in my opinion, get a younger quarterback next year, a decent guy out of the draft, I think they could go back to one of the top contenders in the AFC. But anyway, I think Kansas City can make plays on Ben. Ben, his arm power has definitely gone down this season, and the accuracy and the rapport with his receivers just isn't there. So I think Ben makes a few mistakes in this one. And I think Kansas City has a field day, and I got them at number 2. Number 3, the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys, just like the Chiefs, their defense has been winning them ball games the majority of the season now here is Dallas, where their offense has went in a total tailspin over the last 6 weeks of the season here. Their biggest game was Week 10 versus Atlanta, and ever since that, they only cracked 30 points once, was the Dallas Cowboys. But that hasn't been really on the offense. It's been the defense making plays and stuff. Week 13 in New Orleans for the Cowboys here. 17 points allowed, 2 sacks, 4 interceptions, and a touchdown on a pick six. Week 14 at the Washington football team, who they versed this week. 14 points allowed, 5 sacks and 3 fumble recoveries, a touchdown off of it, and a block kick. And then week 15 at the Giants, another field day for them. 6 points allowed, 3 interceptions, a sack, and a fumble recovery. So right here, they verse Washington once again. Sunday Night Football. Washington, it looks like Taylor Heineke should be back in this ball game. But to be honest, former Dallas Cowboy Gary Gilbert, he looked decent in that first half of the game versus the Eagles. Then the game got away. But right here, they played well in Washington, the defense, a few weeks ago. And I think they get to Heineke again. They were throwing him around in that ball game, and he really took a beating. And the Cowboys, over the last few weeks, one of the best defenses in fantasy football, and I think they reached double digits once again, have at least 1 or 2 turnovers this week. Number 4, the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles here, a 1-week recommended pickup with a good matchup versus the New York Giants. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the last few weeks here for Philly, week 12 at the Giants, 13 points allowed, a sack. Week 13 at the Jets, 18 points allowed, 2 sacks and interception. And week 15 versus Washington, 17 points allowed and 2 sacks. I know those numbers aren't really big coming off the board here for Philly, but right here they're keeping teams down into those mid-teens to low 20s type of scoring range. And I think here the Giants are probably going to go with Fromm in this one. Daniel Jones, they already ruled them out for the season. And right here, Mike Lennon's been a train wreck. So I think Fromm's going to get the start. And to be honest, Fromm looked decent in the couple drives he came in towards the end of the Cowboy Giant game last week. But I think Philly's going to put pressure on him. Philly was embarrassed in Week 12 losing that one 13-7. And this defense is starting to make plays and get to the quarterback. And this week here, I got him in number 4. Number 5, the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Chargers here, their defense really hasn't been that great this season. But right here, they got a very great matchup at the Houston Texans that give up the 4th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. And as of now, filming this video here, Brandon Cooks is on the COVID list and most likely out this week. And Cooks, believe it or not, it's been a great fantasy season for him here, with even Davis Mills as his quarterback the majority of the season. So Davis Mills, he's not a total scrub in my opinion, but he's still a young quarterback, not a highly drafted quarterback as well as we know. And I think the Chargers in this one, they got to bounce back after a tough loss from Kansas City and have a big game. The last few games here for the Chargers, Week 13 at Cincy, 22 points allowed, 6 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown. Week 14 versus the Giants, 21 points allowed, 2 sacks, an into, and a fumble recovery. And then Week 15 versus Kansas City, like I mentioned, not much, 34 points allowed, a sack, and an into. But right here, Texans give up the 4th most fantasy points to DSTs. And I think this week here, the Chargers have a field day, especially with Brandon Cooks most likely out. Number 6 was staying in Los Angeles. And I'm going with the Los Angeles Rams. So on paper, it's not a great matchup at the Minnesota Vikings that give up the least amount of fantasy points to defenses on the season. But right here, this Ram team, it looks like they got all their guys back now. And most of these guys were on the protocol list here. Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald. I'm not sure if he was or not. But as of now, he's healthy. So if he's healthy here, these guys are going to make noise. And let's be honest, this Minnesota Viking offense, I know on the road they're a different team than at home. And they're home in this game. But Kirk Cousins, you know, he's bound to make mistakes. Even though this season, I'm going to be honest, he's been a good quarterback for the most part. But anyway, the last few games here for the Rams. Week 13 versus Jacksonville, 7 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. Week 14 at Arizona, 23 points allowed, 4 sacks, 2 windows. And Week 15 in that sloppy ball game on Tuesday night versus Seattle, 10 points allowed, 3 sacks, and an into. So right here at Minnesota, I think they can hold that offense down to the mid-teens to lower 20s. Adam Thielen, we'll see if he plays in this game. But right here, they got a lot of good guys on this defense as Los Angeles. And they're trying to make that final push here for the playoffs, where they have a shot now of taking that division. We're winning 3 in a row, and Arizona collapsing the last couple games, losing 2 in a row here. So I think they go into Minnesota, take care of business, and this defense will set the tone a little and make a few plays. Number 7, the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks, we know this season, it's been a lost season for them, and they're easily out of the playoff chase here. But they got a great matchup here in Week 16 versus the Chicago Bears that give up the 5th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. But the last few weeks here, Seattle, they've been actually usable for fantasy owners. Week 13 versus San Francisco, 23 points allowed, a sack, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a safety. Week 14 at Houston, 13 points allowed, 2 sacks. And Week 15 in that sloppy ball game on that Tuesday night, the defense played pretty decent, I think, versus Stafford and the Rams offense. 20 points allowed, 4 sacks, and an interception. So right here, Justin Fields and the Bears going to the 12th man over there in Seattle. And I think it's going to be a long game here. Justin Fields really hasn't shown me anything this season to make me scared if I have a defense in fantasy to play them against them, because I think it's a plus in my opinion. And I think they have a good game this week here, Seattle. And I got them in number 7. Number 8, the Atlanta Falcons. So the Falcons here, they're 1 week top 12 ranking here, because their defense this season, for the most part, has been top 5 worst defenses in all pro football the last few weeks here for them. Week 13 versus Tampa, 30 points allowed and a pick 6. Week 14 at Carolina, 21 points allowed, a sack, 2 windows, a pick 6, and a fumble recovery. And then Week 15 at San Francisco, they didn't do anything. 31 points allowed and a fumble recovery. But right here, this week here, Week 16 versus Detroit, the Lions, we know, is one of the worst teams in football, even though they came off a nice victory versus the Arizona Cardinals in Week 15. But right here, they give up the 7th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And right here, Jared Goff is on the safety and protocol list. We don't know if he's going to play. Swift and Jamal Williams should be back at least, though, in this game for Detroit. But I don't think it makes a difference. Atlanta's at home. I know they got a long shot of making the playoffs here, but at least they've been a competitive team for most of the season. So I think in this one, their defense could step up and make a few plays here for the Falcons. And I got them in number 8. Number 9, the New England Patriots. So the Patriots, obviously one of the best defenses all season here in fantasy football, but a very tough matchup versus Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills here that give up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the last few games here for New England, Week 12 versus Tennessee, they had a big game. 13 points allowed, 2 sacks in it, though 3 fumble recoveries. Week 13 at Buffalo, 10 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then last week in Indianapolis, they didn't do much of anything. 27 points allowed, a sack, and an into. So right here, wouldn't be surprising to me if we see similar numbers from New England versus Buffalo like we did in Week 15 at Indy, where they don't do much, but I think they could have a decent ball game. I know that Week 13 game in Buffalo, they only gave up 10 points. But to be honest, the winds were 50 miles per hour where no one was throwing the football. And it was obviously one-dimensional where you know an offense is going to run with those heavy winds. So this week here, I would tamper my expectations for this New England team. And I think they'll probably get it highest, maybe 7 to 9 fantasy points. But hey, there's still a defense that goes out there and can make plays. The next defense is the Buffalo Bills. Bills here, they've been one of the better defenses this season here in fantasy football. I know the last few weeks here, the numbers haven't been all that great besides Week 15. But before that, Week 13 versus New England, 14 points allowed, a fumble recovery. 14 at Tampa, 33 points allowed, 2 sacks. And then Week 15 versus the Panthers, 14 points allowed, 4 sacks, and an interception. So right here, Week 16 in New England, we're going to see if the winds are going to be heavy. I'm sure in Gillette Stadium, there's going to be some type of weather problems in this one where it's going to either favor the defense in this game. But I think Buffalo here needs this game. New England, they're right up there with them tied, I believe, in the standings in the AFC East. And right here, the Buffalo Bills, I know they lost White for the season, their star cornerback. But this defense, I still can make a few plays. And Mac Jones, he's been good as a rookie, but he's still a rookie. And he's not matchup proof. So I think Buffalo in this game could have a decent fantasy day. And I got him in number 10. Number 11, the New Orleans Saints. Saints here last week shut down Tom Brady and that high-powered Tampa Bay Buck offense. And this week here, they got a good matchup here as the Saints. I know last week, Brady, he lost a lot of key weapons in that game with Fournette, Godwin, and Evans going down. But this defense here this season, for the most part, they've been pretty impressive, in my opinion. The last few weeks from Week 13 versus the Dallas Cowboys, they held that offense down pretty well. Only 21 points allowed, a sack and an into. Week 14 at the Jets, 9 points allowed, 3 sacks. And then last week at Tampa Bay, they had the shutout with 4 sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery. So right here, the Saints definitely in the hunt for a wild card spot this season here. And this week, they got a pretty good matchup on Monday Night Football versus the Dolphins that give up the 11th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So right here, I think they get to Tua Tagovailoa a few times. Tua last week versus a poor New York Jet defense didn't look all that great. It was the Duke Johnson show for the most part. So right here, I think this could be a defensive type of battle on Monday Night Football. And I think the Saints could come out with a decent ball game here. And it wouldn't surprise me in this one to see them get a couple turnovers and double-digit in fantasy points. And the 12th and final defense I'm starting this week in the rankings is the New York Jets. So the Jets here, we know they've been a piss-poor defense the whole season. But I'm playing a matchup this week here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, who give up the most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the Jets still available in 95% of fantasy leagues. In the last few weeks for this defense, Week 13 versus Philly, 33 points allowed, 2 sacks. Week 14 versus New Orleans, 30 points allowed, 3 sacks. And Week 15 in Miami, 31 points allowed, but a sack, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown returned in that ball game. So right here, I think they can make a few plays on Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence, it's been a bad rookie season for him, no doubt about it. But last week, he looked a little better with a little bit of a different offense with Urban Meyer gone. But I think the Jets can make a few plays. They're the home team in this one, and I could see this ball game being low scoring, where it's a grinded out game for both teams here. So I think the Jets at number 12 this week is a decent option. So that's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking for Week 16 of the fantasy football season.